All right, welcome back to Somm2Somm. This month we have another really great guest, Haley Moore from Stock and Bones Restaurant Group in San Francisco. Made the trek up to Napa. I know it's terrible coming up here, but you had other things, so might as well. Right. So welcome to the show,
Thank you.
and tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you got here and everything else about you.
Absolutely. So I think feel pretty lucky that I actually figured out what I wanted to do pretty early on in life. I started working in restaurants 17 years ago, which is hard to believe. Spent literally all of my adult life in restaurants. Of course, started waiting tables and hosting and doing all of that good stuff. Worked in the kitchen for a while as well. And I basically, I went to college actually for hospitality tourism management, and graduated from San Diego State with an emphasis in restaurant management and operations, which was a really fun major. It kind of added some of the business component to the restaurant world for me. I went to culinary school after that. I thought I was going to be a chef. I loved the kitchen. I loved cooking. And I came back to the U.S. and started working at a restaurant called Acote over in Oakland. Jeff Berlin is the winemaker, or the GM there, and he's sort of gave us the language to talk about wine. He brings a lot of like passion and intensity and excitement to his programs, and so he definitely he made wine the sort of focus for me. So I realized that was more fun, being out on the floor, telling stories, talking to people, was kind of where I wanted to be. And so I pretty quickly signed up with the court and did the Court of Master Sommeliers, level 1 and certified, and then did the, of course, kind of obligatory management role. I knew I wanted to stop serving and be a manager, so I did a year of restaurant management, which was great. I learned a lot of things about payroll and inventory and all the fun stuff, all of the office work. But I knew I wanted to be a sommelier, so I actually found out that Bacar in San Francisco was hiring, and I interviewed for that position and got that in 2007, I want to say, or 6, and then did that for about 2 years. I knew that I wanted a bigger program. The writing was kind of on the wall, unfortunately, that restaurant was going to close. It was definitely a legendary place when it was alive. I loved it.
It was.
But it was becoming apparent that it wasn't going to be around for much longer. So same deals. I found out Spruce was hiring and was able to jump over there, and was there for about 3.5, almost 4 years. And it was a really great experience. Big wine list. We built it from about 1,900 selections to 2,700 while I was there, and buying cellars and acquiring a lot of beautiful wine, and obviously getting to open a lot of beautiful wine was sort of the highlight of that position. And then I wanted to kind of do the next thing, which was really multiple restaurants. You know, I knew that the growth opportunity at Spruce I'd come to the end of that, and it was time to look for the next big thing. So now I have 4 restaurants in San Francisco and then 1 up in Portland that I oversee, and I do everything beverage. So thankfully, I have some great cocktail people who create cocktails for me, and I'm more of the numbers person behind that, because the bars I bartended out were not high level by any means. And then I also focus on beer as well as coffee and all that good stuff too.
Coffee and everything too. Yeah.
Everything liquid.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
It's a fun world.
That's a big part of the programs these days. I think, phasing out the cigars and all that, and the cocktails and coffee and all
Absolutely.
that. Teas and all that.
Absolutely.
You see like what places like EMP are doing with their service and stuff, and there's a lot of cool things happening.
It's true. And the single origin coffee movement it's pretty beautiful.
There's another show or series of shows, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's really interesting that you kind of went straight into the restaurant thing all along. A lot of our guests kind of come from an angle, something else, and we all end up in wine indirectly. But that's
my parents actually they took me to Paris when I was 15, and before that trip I was like a macaroni and cheese and hot dogs kid, and it was before the euro, so the American dollar went a lot further, and we dined in restaurants that were the nicest restaurants I'd ever set foot in, and they were, of course, allowing me to have wine with all of the food. And I sort of understood at that moment, it was kind of a pivotal time where you sort of see, what food and wine does together, and the way that it pairs, and just, having that experience and understanding how food and wine can elevate each other, and then, beyond that, what service was. I mean, I remember dining at this restaurant where all these guys are in their tuxedos and they're standing, and I was just like, I told my parents, they still bring up this story because they think it's funny, but I was like, I feel all these eyes on us, like all of these people are just waiting to like descend if we need anything. And I was just fascinated by it. I was like, this is this is graceful and it's elegant and it's incredible.
That's why I was saying, like the top end of fine dining, everybody has their job, including the diner.
Absolutely.
You gotta like eat the food and get it out of there because there's more coming. So yeah.
No, it's beautiful for sure.
No, that's great stuff. Well, we've got some champagne for you. I know
Nice.
so that's important.
Cheers.
And
I don't really like champagne. Just kidding.
no, but I mean it's a new thing.
It's a terrible
so
joke.
they do secondary fermentation in a bottle. And it's pretty. I think it's got some potential.
Yeah, that's delicious.
Yeah. So we like I was saying before, we talked to a lot of former Somms and current Somms and things. But, this is the first time we had a multi-unit person involved. So maybe you can explain a little bit more about what your day-to-day role is running multiple operations, especially when they're spread out like that. How do you...
Well, what's really nice, I think our owners had a lot of foresight in opening restaurants that are in relatively close proximity to each other. So my joke is that I run in circles, like literally and figuratively, every day. I try to hit each restaurant at least once, if not twice. Every day, and I'm lucky to have really great beverage manager type sommelier types on the floor at each of those restaurants, and they're the people on the ground. So for me, I'm really looking for people who are organized and can have attention to detail and can kind of be my eyes and ears and voice all at once. So I would say I spend a lot of time kind of checking in with them, making sure they have everything they need to do their jobs. And then there's a lot of, back of the house kind of systems that are set up as far as everything right now for us is on Google Docs, which is kind of a godsend.
Do you still touch tables and
Absolutely.
sell juice directly to
Well, I kind of joke that it's like, being a spreadsheet sommelier, like you have to walk onto the dining room floor to remember why it is that we all do this, because that's the joy, right? It's like to be able to sell someone a bottle of wine and then to be there and facilitate them through that experience and to like be a part of that. I mean, that's the juice, that's the fun part.
Yeah, that's the thing I miss the most is that feeling when you hook somebody up with something great and they get excited.
And they're like so excited.
Exactly.
It's a little selfish. Like I tried to work in retail for a little while. I worked at Kermit Lynch on the weekends because I'm obsessed with everything that he does, and his wines are obviously fantastic, but I didn't get that same thing in retail where it was like I wanted to go home with them and like I wanted to like or they'd come back and tell me about it, but I had to like wait for them to come back and be like, oh, it worked really well with that dish, like you said, and I was like, I needed that immediate gratification.
It's true. I worked in retail too, and you fill up a case and then hope they come back and what did you like last time?
I was like, this is so selfish that I need to be a part of it.
No, it is. It's it was always the challenge. So I don't like white wine. Oh well, we'll fix that.
Yeah.
Boom. There you go.
I was like, ready. I'm going to change your life. Yeah.
So I think your role right now leads right into the big John Bonet controversy when he left and said that Yoon Ha was the last sommelier in San Francisco, and there was a lot of blowback off of that. But I thought of all the things that sorted themselves out. Yeah, I think a lot of people just got their feathers ruffled. But I thought you had a really great take on it because I do think you had a little bit of a point.
Absolutely.
But I think your take on it was great. Can you illuminate that or just kind of build on that for us?
Yeah, and it's funny. I'd run into him the weekend before that article came out, and we were talking about it. And the conversation that we shared was actually, I understood exactly what he was trying to say. I think maybe the tact or the way in which it was said was not necessarily the way it was intended. Because it was definitely a little bit more, maybe a little bit more aggressive than it needed to be. But yeah, I think that mentorship in the city has just really changed a lot. I mean, it's a different situation than it was when, in the 90s, restaurants were bringing in so much money that you could afford to have a team of sommeliers and you could afford to pay a master sommelier to run that program. And, now it's so expensive to do business in San Francisco. I mean, obviously minimum wage going up again. And just the cost of rent and everything else, it's pretty unbelievable. And unlike other major cities like New York, I think a lot about, what differentiates us. It's also expensive to do business in New York, but there's so many more people to pull from that I feel like and this is obviously just an assumption, but that the top line, the revenue that's being generated is so much higher that you can afford to have teams of people. Whereas in San Francisco, a lot of these positions are manager positions that are combined with wine duties. In my restaurants, it's absolutely the case. I'm looking at having teams of sommelier types who want to leave this role and go on to be, sommeliers at Michelin restaurants or wine directors themselves. And I find that, my job really, and what gives purpose to my job really, is to equip them with all the tools that they need to be able to go and do that. So not just knowing about what, varietals are grown in champagne. But understanding the financials, understanding how to run profitable programs, understanding how to make informed buying decisions. I mean, these are all really important things, and it's definitely a different scenario than it's been in the past.
That leads right into our spin-off show, Lindsay Huntsman's The Lineup. She talks about being a manager and that part of the business, which is a big part of it now. And you don't just get to sit back and, pop bottles and, spend your time in the cellar when you're not doing something anymore, which that's all I ever did. So I never had to do that. But
well, and I think you have to kind of go out of the way to find mentorship now. You know, I mean, it's not happening as much in the workplace. It's happening in different ways. I mean, for me, working food and wine events, saying yes to things like Pebble Beach Food and Wine. I mean, there's a lot of hours in those moments where you're buffing glasses.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of good conversations that happen with people that are more experienced and better at their jobs than I am, that I can, ask them, and a lot of knowledge that I gain with a buffing rag in one hand and a stem in the other. I mean, it takes more time and energy. And when you're working, 70, 80 hours a week, I can see how that's challenging, but that's certainly the way to go about it, I think.
Well, the funny thing about it too, there comes a moment when you're looking up at people and you don't realize that there's people looking up to you. And in the lead up to this, I asked a few people about questions and stuff. A lot of them said, "Oh, Haley, I can't, she's like an inspiration for me." And
oh my gosh, no way. Stop.
Exactly. No, no. It happens. It happens. And you're definitely do that. And I think the thing that your post tied together with Bonet's thing is, John was talking about how there used to be the circle of Larry Stone and Raj Part, and then all the tiers of people inside one restaurant. And now what you're doing is kind of the similar thing, but with a collection of restaurants, and it's just a little bit of a higher perspective, but it's kind of the same thing.
I think the challenge for me too, I mean, when you think about, these are all very busy restaurants, and so the time that I have with my team is really between 2:30 and 4:30 every day, and we're still trying to change the restaurant over for dinner service and get prepared for that, and it's all the same crunch time that you have in one restaurant. So it's really 2 hours a day that I'm able to really spend time in the office with them, talking about financials, talking about why we're buying certain things, why we're not, which can be a challenge for sure.
So now, do you manage all your lists, or is there certain autonomy, or how does it work with your different people?
We work towards that, definitely. As of now, I do all of them, but we taste together as a group on Thursdays, and then we sit down once a week together and say, what do you like, what do you not like? We'll have the conversation, and then, for me, unless the wine is like flawed, or there's something incorrect. If one of the sommeliers likes a wine and they're going to be behind it and they're going to sell it, they're the ones on the floor that are doing that every night. I get the luxury of popping around and seeing everyone, and but if they're going to be behind that wine, then I'll say yes. But I mean, unless it's of course completely completely off. But I mean, it's definitely a kind of a co decision making for sure.
So then is another part of your role overall staff education throughout the whole thing? So you go and drop it in the restaurant and like line up or something and do just general staff education?
Yeah, so I do education. I do line up in the morning at lunch. I do a lineup every day, so lunch and dinner, and I rotate. So usually it's, we do a kind of a 90-day education plan as well. So I'll have, the sommelier, beverage manager, come up with a plan, and maybe, at town hall, for example, we'll talk about California Pinot Noir for 3 weeks. And within that, we'll go through all of the, all the AVAs, all of the sub-AVAs, and talk about, different styles and producers. And so there's always something being discussed at lineup that pertains to wine, whether I'm there or not. And then I get to open the bottles and actually do the fun part.
Fun stuff, yeah. Well, that's always
Taste
the best.
them on
yeah,
it,
that's the best part, right?
It's fun, definitely.
When I do staff education, I always try to understand that you're doing a larger scale general wine knowledge. And we'll come in and just talk about the specific wine and the hooks and the angles that make it work.
Exactly.
And I think that's maybe at least what I found to be the best way to, as a distributor, to work with people for staff education. What has been successful for you?
Definitely. Well, we do quarterly classes as well, which is nice. So once a quarter, we'll do like a 2-hour class where we'll open, anywhere from 10 to 15 wines, and they'll, all kind of carry a theme, or we'll talk about, just salesmanship in general, which I think is always a really good refresher course to remind people, how do we sell wine without coming across as like a used car salesman,
right?
Which I think is often the fear. People don't want to.
We always have to overcome that.
Yeah, they don't want to seem pushy, and so how do we, use a language that makes people excited about buying a bottle of wine, or maybe spending more or less, for that matter, but being excited about what they're purchasing. So we do the quarterly classes, and then I also do WSET as well. So we offer that. We do both intermediate and advanced once a year. Advanced is usually more for management, but I have a lot of servers and bartenders that sign up for it as well.
I'm curious, what led you to choose WSET instead of the court?
Yeah, WSET, I kind of transitioned into that after my certified exam. The MW program, I love the idea. I love writing. And for me, it was a lot of, explaining why things are the way they are, and instead of memorizing, so there's of course memorization with any studying. But they spend a lot more time as well kind of saying, okay, well, why does this wine from this vineyard site taste differently than this one? And being able to explain that, for me, it's just, it made it stick.
Cool.
And so
they're both great programs. It's amazing how different they are.
And we pay for both. So, if they want to do level 1, level 2, advanced through the court, as long as they pass, we cover half if they're servers or bartenders. We cover it all if they're managers.
Cool.
So the key is passing.
You have a text question from the online.
Yeah.
You have a question from the online audience, and they wanted to know if you have any specific tips on those sales techniques and those words that you mentioned a few seconds ago.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that the people just want the logic necessary to buy a bottle of wine, and so I always say if it's more expensive, and it's on our wine list, there's a reason why. Maybe that vineyard is super historic and extremely expensive. Maybe it's the wine spent 9 years in the cellar before it was released. There's countless reasons, but I think it's all about really giving the people kind of the logic necessary to make the decisions that they want to make already, and to jump into that bottle and enjoy it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the best thing is to ask questions and find the comfort level where the guest is, because you don't want to bury them in something that's not going to make their meal enjoyable, but you want to find that right bottle.
Exactly. And I do a lot of pricing as well. I mean, I look at that. So I just had someone in from New York last week, and he was like, I can't believe how inexpensive your champagne is. Like, you have all this Loire Valley whites that are so cheap. Like, this is 4 times as much in New York. And I was like, I told him, I'm like, that's intentional. I have certain wines by the glass that are high volume slots, and I make margins on those so that I can have my champagne be retail price, so that more people like us, and
because we like to open champagne,
and that other sommeliers will come in and and drink it. I have a program at Town Hall too called Aging Gracefully, which is all it's Bordeaux, Burgundy, and California Cabernet going back to the 60s, and it's all marked up like 1.5 times. So the inspiration was like those old New Orleans wine lists where you're like flipping through and you order by bin number, and half the time like they don't have anything that you
right.
You have to order like 5 bottles before you get to one that they actually have in stock. And but I mean, those experiences are always just so
absolutely
great.
Yeah, it's great to be able to introduce people to those types of experiences, and because that's what got a lot of us hooked in this thing.
Absolutely.
And so to have somebody have that epiphany moment is a great thing.
And to have them have it in your restaurant is like,
well, they're always going to remember that.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's how you change people's worlds, for sure.
So let's talk about champagne.
Yeah.
What are some techniques that you use besides favorable pricing to get champagne in the glass? Because sometimes you need that little push to get people.
Absolutely. Well, we have the luxury of serving a lot of fried chicken at Town Hall, and fried chicken and champagne. I mean, fried anything and champagne.
Yeah.
But, I often will actually just splash people little half glasses if they're having fried chicken, and I've sort of developed a rapport with the table and just drop it.
Love it.
And we actually did a champagne dinner about two holiday seasons ago where we did truffle butter injected fried chicken with white truffles and French fries, and we served Krug with it. And we didn't give them silverware. So, and I told them like the inspiration behind this was like family meal. It's like you're eating this plate, and it wasn't beautiful by any means. Everything was tan, and there was no greenery on the plate, and we served it in this like metal bowl. And the idea is that champagne is intended to be on the table with everything. It's not a luxury item. It's not something that is only intended for celebrations. Like, here you're going to eat with your hands, and you're going to drink Krug Grand Cuvée, and it's going to be delicious.
Absolutely.
And it was.
So since let's get geeky here. Since you're a champagne specialist now, most people with fried food, what kind of champagne would you pull? Besides Krug, of course, which goes with everything. But
and I'm like, I love like rich, weighty champagnes. Like J. LaSalle would be another too.
Okay.
Like, kind of grower producer. I love like richer styles, but I think, It's all definitely, I think, richer and kind of more of that brioche bready, a little bit more kind of,
I was gonna say, because I think
Tall
that it
assist.
seems like the conventional was gonna be Blanc de Blanc, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great too,
Yeah, I
definitely.
like the big bold Pinot Noir ones. I mean, this one's 2/3 Pinot, and it's got that
This
kind
is
of oomph for
delicious.
it. So yeah.
Well, and this is nice because it has the texture, but it's also like pretty,
Yeah. So that leads us to, this is a Pascal Lyamont's grower champagne. Now, the days are kind of gone where grower champagne's a novelty. It's just kind of a
Sure.
thing. So how do you work that in where it's not like, oh, have you heard of grower champagne? Because it's kind of, that's not.
Yeah, well, and I forget who I was even listening to. It was a podcast the other day where they were talking about grower champagne being like a sign that the market is totally developed, and I think we're lucky that we have access to so many great growers. The wines they're fantastic and they're fun, and it's a good way to remind people that champagne is wine, that just like everything else, I mean, it's the only region, right, where everything is blended and vintages are blended and vineyards and varietals, and I mean, it's just the amount of blending obviously that goes on in champagne is unparalleled. So it's a good way to remind people that yes, this is wine and that it will differ slightly, from vintage to vintage, and some vintages are challenging and some are easier. And
So how do you work growers into your programs? Do you
Yeah.
pour them? Do you have separate sections for growers? Do you put them all together
I put
by
them all
region?
together.
or-
I have I have kind of a good balance right now, I would say, between grower and Grand Mark. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good way. I do everything by either vintage, non-vintage, and then rosé as a category, but they're all kind of mixed in together.
Yeah, because you were talking about the fact that the terroir, and that's one thing that growers have interjected into the equation is villages.
Yeah.
And speaking specifically about places just like Burgundy.
When I list my champagnes with the village attached to it, which I don't see all the time on wine lists, and of course sometimes the village is, if it says Rem, maybe that's not telling us anything, but for some of these smaller guys, it's nice to know what area we're talking about.
Definitely.
And to remind people that, okay, this is Grand Cru, which I'll even print that on the list sometimes too, depending on what it is.
And of course, we're drinking ours from all-purpose glasses because
Because it's the way of the future.
exactly,
Yeah.
because flutes and coupes are they look nice, but if you enjoy your wine as a wine, this is the way to do it. So,
Exactly.
do you use all-purpose glasses in the restaurants, or you do flutes? Or?
I have actually those tulip Riedel glasses that are I think they're actually technically Prosecco flutes.
Okay.
But they actually have a nice little base and they kind of come up and you can really still get your nose in the glass. When I'm drinking, I definitely do all-purpose.
I like the ones that Krug has. They're kind of
Those
half.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those are cool.
great. So
Yeah.
mine are shaped like that. They're
Okay.
very similar.
Cool. Well, great. Moving on, we got another half bottle on the table, and I wanted to talk about half bottle programs. Do you use a lot of half bottles?
I use a little bit, and they're kind of interspersed within the list. So I think in past programs where they've been really successful is if you kind of separate them out and create a section, which also requires developing a program for them and really making sure that you have all of your bases covered. At Anchor and Hope, for example, our seafood restaurant, I have a half bottle of Sancerre option, half bottle of Chablis option, which makes sense for that area.
Absolutely.
For that restaurant, definitely. But yeah, I just intersperse them within the wine list right now. But I've considered trying to pull them out and put them on a page because I think we would do better if
It seems like restaurants are either all into half bottles or they're not, and it's
Yeah.
like it's almost inversely proportional with the large formats. If you do a lot of large formats,
Yeah.
you don't do half bottles, and
we
vice
had
versa.
so many half bottles at Spruce, and it made it so much fun.
Oh, it's great.
For tasting menus, for pairings. I mean, it gives you so much more flexibility and freedom to pull from a wide array.
Even if you have a deuce and one orders scallops and the other orders steak,
Exactly.
half a bottle for each of you. There you go.
Exactly, and I think training the staff to understand how much better it is for them and the way of the money they're walking away with, as opposed to just selling 2 wines by the glass. It's if you sell a $120 half bottle.
Absolutely. I remember when I was at the mansion, we had a stack of half bottles of Haut-Briand, and those
Nice.
were just like boom, boom, boom all day long. Those
That's
are great.
awesome.
Yeah.
I want to drink Oprah.
And then let's stay with some of we have the beginning and the middle and the end. Sweet wines, another thing. What are some successful strategies you've had using sweet wines?
Yeah, and sweet wine is fun. I mean, I definitely love that, and it's always kind of a good indicator for me when I run sales mix reports. I always look at how much sweet wine is being sold, and it sort of tells me how much my staff is engaging with their table, and it really tells me how much they care. Because
That's
at the end
cool.
of the day, that's the last thing you're leaving them with. Are you going that extra way and saying, okay, I just had the rhubarb shortcake, and Muscat Baume de Venise with that is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the big thing, is just making sure that the staff understands what they are and what makes them special. I pour a lot of high end. We're doing a Royal Tokai Company 1991 Betzek by the glass at Town Hall right now. I have some old 69 de la Vera Cercial Madeira. And again, I kind of lose my shirt a little bit on it in the way of margin, but I think people see those wines and they're so surprised and excited that it's not just some
Oh, yeah.
whatever.
Of course, now we have
common,
foie back, so that
which is amazing.
gives
yes.
you another chance to use it.
Absolutely.
So, how have you been using it since the foie is back? What have you been
Yeah,
playing with? What's
I mean,
fun?
definitely that Tokai is fun.
Oh, I bet.
Especially when you have fruit components on the foie. Actually, up in Portland, our chef was doing a foie gras. She was doing donuts that was rolled in marionberries that she had actually dehydrated. So she was doing these like donut holes with the seared foie, and then she had the torchon on the plate as well. It was like unbelievable.
Wow.
And with Tokai, the way the acid levels matched with the marionberry, and she had like a little jam on the plate too. It was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I noticed at Pebble, almost every chef station had something with foie.
I
It
ate
was
a good amount of foie gras.
Yeah, it was a
and
little over the
caviar that
top. Yeah,
weekend.
my old chef John Teasar did the king crab, and it was like the lightest dish in,
Yeah.
in the tent. It was great. Well, that's really cool. Another thing I think is suggestion. All
Absolutely.
these things. If you can get the staff to say, "Would you like to start with a glass of champagne? Would you like the sweet wine that
Yeah.
pairs with that?" It gets the ball rolling.
Well, and I
'cause-
think people connect to people, not tasting notes. So it's important to know what the wine tastes like. It's important to know, something about it. But I mean, when you talk about the people behind it or the history behind it, I think people really connect to that. If you talk about Madeira and the island of Madeira, and I mean, you could talk about that forever and how cool it is.
Absolutely.
And if you get excited, that's the biggest thing I say with sales. It's like, that's contagious. I mean, I had one of the greatest sales experiences happen to me. And my husband, we were in Tuscany, and we were actually in Florence, and we found this little wine bar, and it was these two brothers and this guy. Like, we spent more time there and probably more money there than we had in 3 weeks in Italy, but it was like the best time I've ever had. And he was really he was selling, but he was excited, and I was excited. And then the next night, that day he pulled out this old bottle of like orange wine, and he told us, he's like, "Oh, I can't put this on ice because it'll shock it, but I'll put it in the fridge and come back tomorrow and we'll drink it." And I'm sitting here going, "What time? Like, what time can I come back and do it again?"
Did they do the Avenare service with the
Exactly.
seasoning?
Oh my God, that's awesome, yeah.
It's crazy. Sometimes you're like, "Can I just have my wine already?"
Yeah.
We buff the glasses so they're clean. We don't need to season them. But
he was like opening up Monprovato for us and blind tasting us on it. I mean, it was just so
Awesome.
much fun. But his excitement was so contagious that I was like,
It's true. It's true. If there's a wine that you get behind and you're excited about, and you carry that enthusiasm, it's going to make the guests that much
Exactly.
happier, and they're going to have a great experience. And,
absolutely.
and that's what we do. So,
And there's a story behind everything. It's like, even if I think a lot of servers sometimes will say like, "Oh, I don't like it," and it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily matter,
Exactly.
because if you're matching taste with someone else's taste and you're giving them that experience and they like it, that's what matters. Tell the story, be excited about the story, and then give someone a really beautiful experience. Like, that's the goal, right?
Well, that's another great thing about building wine programs is it's not about you necessarily. It's about what's best for the guests in the restaurant.
Exactly.
And sometimes they're going to want a style of wine that maybe we wouldn't drink, at home
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
fun, but you need to represent the best example of that you can find.
I say that all the time with Town Hall, especially. If I were writing a wine program for the food, it's Southern cuisine, it's New Orleans inspired. Like, it would be Northern Rhone whites, it would be Loire Valley, so Chenin Blanc, Riesling, Champagne, and Cru Beaujolais. Like, and that's it. And that's not what we sell
Right.
at all.
Right.
Unfortunately, right? Our guests are not sommeliers. But they, and they want to drink big California wine, and so we have great producers on the list that are great representation of what we do here in California. And is it the best pairing with the food? Maybe not, but are they having the time of their lives? Like, absolutely, or at least that's what we hope for, right? So
Well, fortunately, bringing it back to John Bonnet, we have a whole set of wines now that have some acclaim that actually work with that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
what are some of your favorite, new Californias that are working for you?
yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. I mean, the new California thing, and I
They're
grew
not
up.
really new, but yeah.
No, that's what's so nice to see. It's like everything that's old is new again. But But I think what's really beautiful, I mean, you talk about, in pursuit of balance, I think was something, and going to that seminar, there was a lot of like defending of that term. And I don't know if they're getting slack for it or something, but what I do know is that, being in pursuit of balance is the absolute best thing, right? And taking out some of the language about picking early or, growing up here, that was the way it was done. I mean, it was the 80s and we were coming up to Napa all the time when Highway 29 was, a lot quieter than it is now, that's for sure. And the wines were lower in alcohol, and my parents still have a lot of those Cabernets from, mid 80s laying around the house that are, 11.5%, 12%. And whether that was a vineyard management choice or accident or not, or it was intentional, who knows. But yeah, I mean, some of the great, obviously, Literai, I just love those wines.
Oh yeah,
I think
absolutely.
He's definitely a rock star. And
they're brilliant wines. But I think it's funny, some of those, I mean, it's not just a new thing. There's Aubin Clément and Calera.
Yeah.
And some of these guys that were the pioneers that are just doing what they do.
Well, and that was what was so interesting. I was in Santa Barbara recently and talking to Jim and Bob Lindquist down at Coupe. They share a facility right there in Bienesito. And they're like, well, this is the way it's always been done. And they got a lot of slack for that for a long time, and a lot of pushback from the Wine Spectator. And, thank God for them for just continuing to do what they do, because their wines are phenomenal. And they really they set the groundwork and the framework for everyone else, so.
I would love to see them continue that into like Cabernet with wines like Kathy Corzin or Philip Tony or Maya Camus or, there's all these wines in Napa. It's not just Chardonnay and Pinot. There's lots of balanced wines all over the place. I think it'd be a really great opportunity for them to go forward with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's nice to see, definitely. I think there are some people that are taking it a little too far, and there are times where it's like, oh, we pick early, and then, if you're picking too early, the wines are not in balance. So the whole back to the in pursuit of balance thing, it's like, well,
yeah, it's not in pursuit of acid.
It's not in pursuit of removing the enamel from my teeth.
Right. Nothing wrong with those wines either,
absolutely
though.
Not. Yeah.
We'll have a little Shannon and a little dry Riesling, something like that. But
Yeah.
absolutely, a little champagne. Yeah.
I know. I was speaking of acidity, but
Exactly. Well, put a little RS in there and balance it out.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about. Well, looks like we've reached our time limit.
Nice.
It always flies by. It's
It does. This is
we
fun.
could go into overtime if we have questions or anything like that. But we'll draw the curtain here. And thanks for coming
Thank
to the
you.
show. It's
Cheers.
been another great episode,
This
and
is
I
fun.
really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.